Welcome back to another episode of Kicking It with Coach Red, where we bring you all the news, stories, takes, and opinions about your favorite teams from the Pacific North, fresh from the good to the bad to the Mariners.
The sweet, sweet Mariners, baby. It's so close.
Week and a half away, be getting you a Mariners preseason preview award ceremony show coming in the near future. But since we last spoke a week ago, the Seahawks have made some more signings. Haven't made all the
Boy.
signings that we were hoping and praying for. Feel like since it is St. Patrick's Day today, they got a little bit lucky on some of these, maybe a little luck of the Irish.
Sure.
And maybe there's some luck to still be had. But before we dive into those signings, why don't I tell you a little bit about us? If you're looking for a guy that is just like the stereotype for this holiday. Ginger, part Irish, got a pot of gold somewhere. Okay, I'm not gonna tell you where it is. It's not at the end of a rainbow. But I might tell you if you follow me, your boy Coach Red on X at the real Coach Red, on Instagram at the real underscore Coach Red, TikTok at the real Coach Red. Also find the show over on YouTube. Search Kicking It with Coach Red. Like, subscribe, hit the bell notifications, and leave a comment or two. And if you're looking for a guy that, if we're gonna stick with the theme in the pot of gold, maybe this is the next Marshawn Lynch. Maybe he just loves Skittles so much he's gonna taste the rainbow.
Sure.
Loves Skittles. It's
Do
Kane.
love Skittles. That is true. Skittles are my all-time favorite candy. Yeah, I'm Kane. You can find me over on Twitter, Kane2406, TikTok, Kane0624. Also follow the show's socials over on Twitter and Instagram at Coach Red Pod. False. Do it, freaking do it.
So we already talked about the re-signings in the last episode. There was a handful of guys that ended up signing their tenders, uh, their restricted free agent tenders, and that was Cody White, Josh Jobe, and Brady Russell.
Yes.
So
Yes.
we're not going to dive into those guys. We are going to look at the guys that signed outside of the organization because they haven't re-signed any of the guys outside of Jaron Reed and
I
Amos
mean,
Jones.
we low key touched on Sam last week.
But we're just going to start in order of the from the exterior free agents, and Sam Darnold is the one. When we were talking about this last week, we've gotten more contract details, we've gotten more information. So, Sam Darnold, before we hop into that, on a scale of 1 to 10, when we get done, we're going to say how lucky the Seahawks were to get this person. And your reasons for how lucky or unlucky they were, you can explain
Sure.
your heart away.
Sure.
So Sam Darnold, 3 year, up to 100.5 mil, 55 mil guaranteed, which basically turns that into a 2 year, 27.5. But with the way this is structured, if Sam Darnold is on the roster, basically when the Super Bowl happens and is healthy and they decide to cut him the next year, it's only 37.5. They can get out at 37.5 after 1 year.
Yep. So any money after that is no dead money. That is one great thing. But I like it. I really do. Um, kind of the cards you were dealt at this point, right?
Well, you dealt him
Gino.
yourself.
Well, sure,
You dealt
right?
you dealt this hand yourself.
um, well, Gino with what has been kind of thrown out throughout the week and just didn't get back to him when the Hawks initially sent out an offer.
Well, he said no to the offer
Yeah,
and
and
didn't negotiate.
counter and just got rid of him. I think it was a good pivot to go get Sam Darnold, especially with the familiarity with Clint Kubiak. I think that's what it really all stems down to is you can kind of call him the system quarterback, which, hey, man, if it works, it works, right? Kevin O'Connell kind of runs the same offense, just a little
Similar
bit more,
scheme.
just a little more explosive, right? With the tools that he has compared to what the Seahawks have. Um, but I just think that it's a good fit. It is a very good pivot from Gino. You're 7 years younger, which I really like. I keep forgetting that he's 27, that he came out at 20 because that was a time before NIL deals. So Like, I don't know. I think in the right situation, Sam Darnold can thrive. We saw that last year, and hopefully that they can kind of recreate that opportunity for Sam this year. But I love the signing. I really do.
And you look at some of the parallels that you'll see, right? The offensive line plays similar between the two. Pretty solid on the on your tackles. Interior was not that good for either squad last year. The Seahawks still have work to do in that regard. So it's going to be interesting to see how that comes together. Ship off DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, for all the history and how much love I have for Tyler Lockett. Even if you exclude, I was talking to Scott the Thought today. He's like, if Tyler Lockett comes back on like a lesser deal, I go, I don't think that's going to happen because if you look at the 2 games in a row that DK was out injured, Lockett had like 3 catches for 30 yards
Yeah,
in
just
those 2 games.
wasn't getting it done.
So, do I think that Aaron Jones, Cam Akers is a comparable backfield to Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet? If everyone's healthy, sure, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I think that you look at 2 guys that have been mirror of each other because they came out at the same time and went to the same college. Now they're both going to be catching passes from Sam Darnold, TJ Hawkinson, Noah Fant. I think
Yep.
the athleticism should play. It just has never popped, right? And you see the athleticism play. I think that AJ Barner, I think they have a deeper room there than what you saw with.
Because I believe it was Irv Smith and TJ Hawkinson out of their
I thought it
tight
might
end
have even
room.
been Munt.
They might have been as well. I think so, but I would believe that so far AJ Barter and Noah Fant comparably could be a just as good tight end room. And I mean our receiver room looks a
We're
lot
not. We'll
different.
get there. We'll get there.
Yeah.
But what I will say with Sam Darnold is he had Justin Jefferson,
Yep.
had Jordan Addison.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't predicated on running the football. And that's what Mike McDonald has stated all throughout last year. It's what Clint Kubiak wants to do. It's what Sam Darnold knows from Clint Kubiak at his time with San Francisco 49ers.
Yeah.
And if you can run the ball efficiently, and the other thing that the Seahawks have a little leg up on the Vikings is I think that the Seahawks defense is better than the Vikings, especially
I
coming into
agree.
this year.
I
So
agree.
you're putting it's what I like to say when we talk about building up a team. If you don't draft a quarterback too early, you got to know where you're at when you're building a team, right? You look
Mm-hmm.
at the cap room that was available to the Commanders last year, the investment that they put along the trenches. You go get a veteran in Bobby Wagner to go on this team. You go make a trade for Marshawn Lattimore. You put these pieces in place. And you've seen what they've been able to do with the cap that they have because you're paying a rookie quarterback right now
Mm-hmm.
and what you can do to build around that. So many teams put the quarterback before the horse, and what ends up happening is you're not ready to compete, and that's when you see some of these problems. It's what the Jets did with Sam Darnold. They were not ready
Also,
to compete.
yeah, exactly. And they put him in a horrible situation. He'd never had an O line and was seeing ghosts, dude. He was a 20-year-old kid in the limelight in New York. It's never it's we've seen this time and time again, right? With young quarterbacks going to New York, it never works. But you start to saw the switch in San Francisco, right? Working with
Sure.
kind of the weapons, learning as he also credited in his interviews last week, right? Learning from Clint, being talking and also talking to like Brock Purdy and stuff. Like those are all from Sam Darnold's lip, right?
Yeah.
And getting the confidence that Kevin O'Connell kind of put in him, I think, last season. I think that's what you're getting out of Sam this year because I think Mike and him are just gonna be best buds. They're both pretty
Well,
dry.
and when you really look at Sam Darnold, when you really look at available quarterbacks on the open market, he was the number one guy,
Yep.
So when you look at that, he chose the Seahawks, and it was relatively early in the process, right? This came pretty early Monday in the
Mm-hmm.
legal tampering
I
period.
mean, literally, a report came out after Gino was traded that was like, nope, Seahawks
They're
focus
gonna
is,
pivoting towards that, but to have
yeah,
that locked and loaded, before the afternoon on the first day of legal tampering, I think was big. It really
yes,
shows and was able to show that no, we're not going for a rebuild. You don't bring back Jaron Reed and Ernest Jones if you're going for a true rebuild, right?
yeah.
So I think it's a reset and it's a roster shuffle. So on a scale of 1 to 10, how lucky are the Seahawks to have Sam Darnold?
I would say with everything that's in place now, I think it's 10 because you have a quarterback now too. So and you didn't know what the plan was after Gino was dealt on a Friday at like 3:30.
Okay.
Coach Red, what is your thoughts?
I'm going to give it a 7 because I think the money is manageable enough. You can get out of it if you need to, but it puts you in a better position right now going
Mm-hmm.
forward, right? You're not relying on just over a year of play with Sam Howell. You're not relying on a rookie coming out of this draft to make an impact right away. Can Sam Howell develop more? Maybe this scheme fits him a little better. Sure, very well could. If he pushes and really makes a play for that number one spot, then I mean, it happened with Matt Flynn and Russell Wilson. Do you draft a guy in day two to
Mm-hmm.
look as an heir apparent and give some time? Yeah, it gives you options, it gives you flexibility, and it gives you a guy who tasted some success. I think he wants to quiet the haters, right? That
Sure.
he can't do it under the limelight, but also really has Kevin O'Connell done well once they've had big seasons and went to the playoffs. No, it hasn't happened that way. So put him in a good spot with a solid defense and hopefully more and more along that offensive line, and maybe sprinkle a little bit more in at his playmaker positions. And I think you're going to put him in a good spot.
I agree. I agree.
The next guy that was signed is a tackle slash guard from Baltimore, Josh Jones, on a 1 year deal up to 4.75 mil. Guaranteeds have not come out on this, even though it's week old.
Yeah, I mean, kind of indifferent, right? It's not going to start. He's just kind of
He
a
shouldn't
filler
start.
piece, right? He shouldn't start. Most likely isn't going to start. Um, it's a depth piece, and
He's had playing time, like came, drafted by Arizona, I think spent a little time
mm,
with Giants and then over in Baltimore. And
in
he's had
Houston,
reps at every spot but center.
yeah, and that's the one thing that you kind of like about him is that he can kind of fill a hole if needed, and seems like a pretty good competitor. Wants to play, wanted to be here. That's kind of the the shtick that we got from this whole process, right? Is John wants players who want to be here.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is, it was baffling that on like day one of legal tampering, you had backup guards and tackles signing early deals. Like you never see that. Like Stone
Mm.
Forsythe signed a deal with the Giants on the first day of legal tampering.
Yeah, it's crazy,
I
right?
one of the.
And it was like
I
10
mean, we
mil.
could talk ill of him now. He's gone,
It
but
was like
like
10 mil too. Like, dude,
he was he was a
Giants saw something the
liability.
Seahawks did not, apparently.
So I think with Josh Jones, I think the flexibility and ability to play that swing tackle spot, I think is huge.
Bro, from the interviews that I heard of him, he sounds like a vibe. And that's kind of what I'm feeling from this locker room. Is just a good vibe coming through it after the reset. Um, yeah, it is just another thing. Like he just wanted to play here. He said that he saw potential in Mike's vision, and that's something good to hear from any kind of player's mouth, right? And I hope that we get some good play out of him. So
How lucky do you feel?
sure, like I'm a two here.
We just talked him up and you went with a 2. Okay.
It's a depth piece, dude. I don't know what you want from me here. What are you gonna give him, coach?
I'm going to give him a 6 because a majority of his playing time has come at right tackle. It's that injury insurance for Abe Lucas, the
Sure.
ability to play multiple positions, and come in at a cap number that's going to max out at 4.75. And that's probably if he hits a ton of incentives. That's a lot smaller number than you were planning on paying George Fant, right?
Yeah.
And we loved Fant for a long time on this show, right?
Yeah.
So I don't want to throw shade there, but what I am saying is it's a pretty modest number for a guy that can play four positions. I would like
Sure.
him to obviously just stick at swing tackle and be there for injuries and not factor into the guard play because
Yeah.
I'd like a guy that is a specialist at guard because we need some specialists. But
Mhm.
so I'm going to give it a little bit of a 6.
Okay. That's fair. I just not like the hype is signing, you know what I mean?
No.
That's I'm just whatever, it's a depth piece to me.
All right. Next player that was signed is Marquez Valdez Scantling, MVS for short, on a 1 year deal up
Yeah.
to 5.5 mil. This is a guy that's played for the Chiefs, for the Packers, and recently was with Clint Kubiak down in New Orleans.
Yep. He had a stop in Buffalo. They released him. Had a good stint with Clint Kubiak. It kind of seemed that, as he said, the big reason why he's here is Clint Kubiak because he just felt such a strong connection with how he ran an offense and it got him open. I believe he had a stretch of 4 games where he caught a touchdown in and was hitting like 80 to a hundo on the yardage, which is what you want to see on somebody who can blow the top off of a defense. And that's kind of like not say to replace DK, but kind of to replace DK, right?
It
He's 30
it
years old.
it replaces the prototype of DK. He's not going to be as
Sure.
physical. He's not going to high point, but he's going to be that guy that takes the top off and opens up that middle of the field a little bit more.
Hmm.
And it's really pointed out by his career numbers. They've never been phenomenal, right?
They've also never been like terrible either.
No, but he's never been like that top guy, right? And
Yeah, I mean, but he's also caught in passes from the likes of Aaron Rodgers, Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen for a little bit. It's a guy that has caught a touchdown in a Super Bowl,
well,
which
with MVS, this is
mhm,
the big playability. That's what you bring him in the door
for
for.
sure.
50% of his catches career have gone for over 20 yards.
Mhm.
80% of his touchdowns are on plays that were more than 20 yards. He's a
It's
guy that
nuts.
if you can put the ball over the top, he can burn by some guys and he's going to open up that middle of the field like I said.
Mhm.
I was not super stoked when the grant we don't have the guarantees on this that it came in at 5.5 when Demarcus Robinson got like a 2 year 8 mil from the 49ers,
Mhm.
which I would have loved that deal. But MVS, I think, is a more consistent, deep threat game in, game out.
Sure, sure. Yeah, I did like the signing. Just also trying to get my hopes into it. I've just been constantly on Seahawks news. Like
Well,
I like the player that he could become in this offense.
well, the other thing is for majority of the year, he was not catching passes from Derek Carr.
Yeah, I mean
So
he also came in. Yeah, I think he played
he was
with
in the later stretch, and it
when
was
Carr
like
came back. I
Carr
think
came back a little bit, but then you were still getting passes from Jake Hayner and Spencer Rattler.
yeah. So hopefully a little bit more consistent quarterback play and we get a little bit more out of him.
How lucky do you feel that
I'm
MVS is in
gonna
town?
I'm gonna sit at a 7 because I liked just the vibe that he gave off at all his interviews, confident and ready to roll. So put me down as a 7, Coach. How lucky do you feel?
I'm gonna give it a 3 because I don't think there was a lot of luck that played into the signing here. I think that
Sure.
he liked what he saw and what could be from a Kubiak offense and how he fits in that role. There's a designed role for that. They're gonna
Mhm.
run, usually a heavier two tight end set. So expect the Seahawks to look at tight ends. But apparently they were in on um,
Juwan Johnson.
Juwan Johnson, right? So I look for them to add someone, whether that's in a good tight end draft or whether that's finding someone else. I think it's probably going to gear more towards the draft now that a lot of the bigger name guys have
Mm,
found homes. But you could see that he wanted to go there. It fits a need for everybody. I think that this move made sense on with a guy that has had success at big time programs, right? In the NFL. He's played for winners for the majority of his career. So bringing a guy in with that type of pedigree, I think helps.
mhm.
And when you looked at where the wide receiver room was at the time of the signing, I was just happy for any wide receiver. I didn't really care who it was.
Yeah, I mean, especially because fantasy value wise, like we've all had MVS probably at one point in time, so that's a good way to follow his career. And you don't get upset by the numbers, honestly.
No,
So
they're solid. They're solid enough for what theoretically is your number three wide receiver.
yeah, 100%.
All right, next player to sign was one that kind of came a little out of left field for me, and it was Demarcus Lawrence,
Yeah,
uh, edge player coming from the Cowboys, signs a 3 year, $42 million deal with 18 mil guaranteed, which basically boils down to a for sure 2 year, 18 at the minimum.
yeah. This is another good signing, and I mean the production may not be there, but
It's not been there
as
as recently. He only played 4 games last year. He still tallied a sack. He's been a little bit banged up in
yeah,
years past,
here's the
but
one thing that I'm excited about, and it's the tutelage that he can bring to your young upcoming pass
edges
rushers like in Boye Mafe, Derek Hall. Imagine having a real pros pro in there at the position, right? Showing them how it's done day in, day out to have a long career as Demarcus Lawrence has and to put up the high numbers that he has. Because I believe last year in those 4 games, he had a sack in each one of those games.
potentially I didn't dive that deep into it just
Also,
because
the run stop is where he truly excels, and I believe he's graded at like a 90 on run defense. So that's something huge to get out of defensive end, and to get somebody with that type of pedigree coming in on that kind of deal, I think that's huge for this team, especially on the defensive side of the ball.
with Demarcus Lawrence, obviously, big shout out to Hawksblogger
Hell
because
yeah!
um, he had the interview where he said, I left Dallas because there wasn't a chance of me winning a Super Bowl. Then Micah Parsons clapped at him and said, "Oh, get out of here, you clown. Like, you were cut loose." And he's like, maybe if you spent less time tweeting and more time winning, I wouldn't have had to leave, which was
Yeah.
epic. But I think what gets lost in that is he's looking to win a Super Bowl and he signs a 3 year deal
With the Seahawks.
with the Seahawks, right? I think he sees the vision that Mike McDonald is putting into that defense. The defense at the
But
beginning of the year played very well, struggled there in the middle. And then once Ernest Jones came around, defense played extremely well down the stretch, right? Was the top five defense finishing out the year. When you look at where they're sitting defensively, Demarcus Lawrence takes the spot of Draymond Jones, who was probably your biggest loss along that defense. I don't think anyone else that you've lost is of that much consequence in the grand scheme of how this defense is put together, right?
mhm.
So you give a guy that's had better numbers than Draymond Jones throughout his career. You go ahead and get back Ernest Jones. Now you get him for the full year. You have Tyrese Knight in there, who was a revelation down the stretch. You give him a full year. You're seeing that this is a Super Bowl caliber defense, right? And that's what got me excited about this move. It was out of left field. I was expecting them to spend less there. I think last week we talked about Clavion Chason and um, the other guy,
But also big
Matthew
shouts to
Judon.
AD Baby Day. Having that connection and getting him in the building. Big shout outs to the big old defensive coordinator for getting this done.
Where do you feel on the luck level here?
Dude, I mean, it's kind of like the same thing, right? I mean, you got to kind of put the luck low because it was our defensive coordinator that got him here. I mean, it's that relationship, right? So let's go with a 4.
Okay.
Coach Red, what do you got?
I give it an 8 because I didn't think they were
Hey,
going to
here.
spend the money to go get that
Sure,
caliber of
sure, sure,
player.
sure, sure, sure.
He always felt like he was going to retire a Cowboy.
Yeah,
It always
right.
felt that way. And so,
But hey, I mean, the guy on what is it? Get Up. I forgot who it was. There's a clip where he's just laughing as Greeny is talking about the Hawks blogger video, right? And he's like, he's speaking the truth. I had to leave because they haven't been to a Super Bowl since '94 or '95.
yep.
Like that's 30 years.
Yeah. I mean, one man's trash is another man's treasure.
Yes, sir.
All right. The last signing that we will be talking about.
Meaningful signing because there was another one, but I don't know anything about him. That corner that they signed. No
Okay.
clue. Yeah,
It's special teams guy.
sure. But that's why I said meaningful signing.
Cooper Cup is coming home. As a couple of fellow Yakamaniacs, originally ourselves, it's good to see some love in the valley. Cooper Cup comes in on a 3 year, up to 45 mil. Guaranteeds aren't out there yet. I'm guessing that it's going to be very heavily incentivized on this. But Cooper Cup, Rams weren't willing to pay it. He's had some injury concerns. He has had one otherworldly year, and the rest of the years he's either been banged up or the production hasn't necessarily been there.
Mhm.
I think that they look at this as bringing a kid home. It's a guy that still has some left in the tank. He gets to play against his old squad twice a year. And I think that JSN gets to learn from him. That yes, are they
It's
both
so
primarily
huge.
slot guys? Sure, but JSN can move all around the field, right? And Cooper Cup is probably one of the better people at catching the ball over the middle of the field. His separation numbers have gone down. He is an older target, but when you look at how this wide receiver room was constructed, you now have two guys that have played in the biggest game that you can play and have shown success at that level. And Cooper Cup was looked at to bounce back with him and Puka this year on just being a two-headed monster. Yes, injuries did hurt him, but he still had over 700 yards and 6 TDs.
Yeah, the production's there. And that's the one thing like that I love about this offense right now because you can throw so many different packages out there. And it's not having to have Cooper on the field all the time. It's not having to have MVS who also can deal with some injuries, right? On the field all the time.
JSN
The
will be on the field all the time.
You will see this offense is going to be ran through JSN and K9. That is facts. That is knowledge that is out there. These are two players that are going to have hopefully career years with this offensive scheme. But adding Cooper Cup, a real captain of the Rams, what for the last 4 or 5 years, he's been a certified just captain of that team and a good voice in a locker room, right? Huge locker room guy. Also wanted to be here. And I am so stoked to see Cooper Cup in a Seahawks jersey. This is one of the sickest things I've ever witnessed as a Seahawks fan. I am super excited about this.
One person, I'm going to deviate slightly from the Cooper Cup thing. We're going to come back to talk about how lucky they were. But Chenwosu wears number 10, just like Cooper Cup. He's like, if he wants it, he can have it. He's built a legacy in that. I want to give him that respect. When they brought in DeMarcus Lawrence, he said, oh, it's another dog in the fight. I think that he's going to get his contract restructured. He is saying all the right things right now as a true blue leader of this team. And I
Oh,
think that's what it's going
100%.
to boil down to with this as a whole, that you are just having guys that are for the greater good of the team. You
Yes.
your
100%.
individual accolades are going to go down with some of these people, right? Cooper Cup's probably not going to get 100 catches this year. JSN probably not going to get 100 catches this year, right? It's not going to happen. You've got a bunch of ballers on defense who they don't care. They're hyped anytime something happens,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You saw the buy-in to that team defensive mentality. I mean, look at when Leonard Williams took that pick six. You look at the week before when Kobe Bryant did it, filling in as an injury replacement, how just absolutely excited and bonkers. Like, yeah, those are big plays, but you're seeing it on the
Yeah.
small plays too. They're hyping up their brothers. And that's what you saw with Chinny Nwosu as being a true leader. And he needs to be on this team. I want them to get that restructured done because it will
Mm.
free up some more money for them to go make some plays for some guys we're going to talk about here in a minute. But Cooper Cup coming to this team, it shows that winners want to be here.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that mentality coming into it, and John even has said it in the interviews, like we just want guys who want to be here.
And
And
he had interest from the Broncos, who are a playoff team. He had interest from the Cowboys, who are bringing back Dak this year, healthy Dak. That typically when he's healthy, they're
the
right in the mix for
Jags,
and the Patriots. I'm talking about like the teams where, hey, these are guys that have won more recently and been in the playoffs.
sure, but it's also like you had interest from lots of teams, especially off offensive minded head coaches that especially were just getting hired. There was interest all around the board. But I think the interest of him wanting to come play for the Seattle Seahawks to come home essentially was I think that was it. As soon as he got released, they were on the phone together and it just came down to the money. And they finally got there. And I just love it, dude. I love this, the leadership that you're getting, the type of like tutelage that he can give to your young receivers is gonna be huge.
How lucky do you feel that Cooper Cup is on the
10,
Seahawks?
dude. 10. Love it. Coach Red, what is how lucky you feeling?
I feel a 10. I feel a
Hell
10.
yeah, brother!
I feel like I got to do an Irish jig. That's how
Love
lucky I feel.
that.
It's an
Hell
Irish
yeah.
jig for Cooper Cup, baby. Happy to have you.
Yeah, great to see him in the blue and green.
So, some people that have come in for visits, rumored to come into visits, or links to the team along the interior offensive line, which is somewhere that we've been talking about them addressing. And I don't think it's been a secret to anybody. So I'm gonna give you three names,
Yeah.
explain a little bit about them, and I want you to tell me which one of these three you would prefer, or if you think we can get all three, or two, however you prefer it. First
Okay.
one is going to be Garrett Bradbury. Just
That's
got
the
released
center just
today.
got released, right?
Center for the Vikings. So played last year
Mm-hmm.
with Sam Darnold. He's been in the league since 2019 and he has barely missed any playing time. Next guy we've got
Yeah.
is Tevin Jenkins. We talked about him on the last episode. I dropped an MFer on him because I love him. He's also coming off injury. He was reported to
Mhm.
be in town today for a visit, wasn't listed. Thanks to Bob Condotta's reporting, wasn't listed on the NFL list, but very well means he could be coming in tonight to have the sit down tomorrow, which I think is going to be heavy on the physical side, right?
Yes.
Last name has connections to the Saints guys and was listed on the visit today was Luke Patrick, has played guard and center, had some
Mhm.
starts last year for the Saints, and I believe had a few games graded above 70 in the run and pass game.
It's pretty decent. I mean, in today's NFL, right? It's pretty average.
So, Kane, the first question, are you going to pick one, two, or three of these guys to bring in?
I think realistically, you could probably only get two, and I
What do
believe
you want?
Two, because I
And
don't
who are
want
those
them.
two and why?
I think you're gonna go with the guy who was right in front of Sam Darnold all year last year in Bradbury. I think you can bring him in on a pretty cheap deal, get him into the Kubiak offense, and I also do think that the guy from the Saints is the one you bring in. I think Tevin Jenkins uh, is going to cost too much capital to bring in. So I would give two guys who are more familiar with the scheme, and also the Saints guy worked with Dennison last year. I think you can apparently Dennison's just a messiah when it comes to the offensive line, is what they're saying. So I say give me the two.
I do not want Garrett Bradbury anywhere near this team.
Sure, sure, dude. But I just ultimately think that Tevin Jenkins could cost too much money.
I'm gonna talk about why and to our friends over at Pro Football Focus because they grade offensive linemen and it's easy for me to read. Um, Garrett Bradbury overall was 62.1 grade, which clocks in for 33rd out of 64 qualifying centers. So right there, he qualified less than there are teams in the league.
Sure, sure.
His pass blocking grade was a 48.2, which clocked him in at 55th. 55th.
That is pretty goddamn
Run
bad.
grade was he clocked in at 70.7, which was good for 14th. Then I go down. He was fourth in offensive snaps played, eighth in pass block snaps, fifth in runs. Out of the 64, he was 51st in penalties with six. He was 58th in sacks allowed with four. He was 61st in hits allowed and 64th in total pressures allowed. And that's out of 64 centers.
Hey man, I still
Out.
think that Olu Timmy's gonna keep the job. So ultimately,
So in this scenario, the two guys that you were bringing in were maybe not starting on this team.
I
You're
don't
just
know,
bringing in
dude.
depth pieces. No, I think that with the young guys under contract on the
And that's
right side,
yeah.
with Lumea, with Anthony Bradford, with Christian Haynes, I
Mhm.
think that those three, they're all young enough, right? Bradford missed a lot of the year last year because he was injured.
Yes.
So the other two were thrust into there. We saw bright spots, we saw not so bright spots, right? So you're looking at outside of Bradford, both of those guys first year in the league. Be interesting to see how they uptick. That's why I'm thinking you need to go get a true blue starter because I also agree that Oluwatimi is going to sit there and be the starter for this team. He was the 24th overall rated center.
Mhm. I mean, he graded out pretty well from the time he took over to the end of the year.
I mean, 24th, it's not ideal, but I'll take it. If you put Tevin Jenkins next to him, I think that left side, because Charles Cross, hands down, is the best lineman from last year, especially
Mhm.
with injury concerns to Abe Lucas. You pair him with Tevin Jenkins, that left side looks pretty ferocious
Sure.
in athletic ability with how those two have graded out. I think that gives you a great start. And then I think Oluwatimi does progress a little bit more. I think that Abe Lucas, with what I'm seeing, he's not rehabbing this offseason. He's thriving. He's getting the work in. I think you're going to see a healthier version of him. And I think with Mike Gerald, you saw some good things from a seventh round guy where
Yep.
he can take that next step full offseason. And that's a big thing for these young offensive linemen. When you come into the league, there's a handful of guys that ball out right away. Most don't.
Yeah, most don't.
Most don't. And it takes that year of getting prepared and getting in that grind, lifting different, being more technical, probably on the scheme than you were taught up in college. You know, a lot of
Mhm.
air raid, quick pass off offense being played there. Not a ton of put your hand in the ground and being versatile both ways. So give me Tevin Jenkins and
Sure.
we'll call it good. Because I think
Sure.
with signing Tevin Jenkins, you could put a cap on free agency. You've filled a majority of your holes. There's not going to be a ton of guys out there that really upgrade you at positions of need. Then all eyes turn to the draft, and you've got good capital in the draft, especially in a class that is deep in some areas that you want to see. The guard depth in this class is pretty solid if you want to go get another guy near the first round. Wide receivers, the wide receivers class is a very good wide receivers class. It's a very great tight end class. The D tackle class is good. The safety room is also good. Those are the areas
Yeah.
that you're looking at. And then I think that you look in the later rounds, take another flyer on a corner, because I'm not sure after this season if you're going to be able to pay Reek the numbers that are going out there to top flight corners. And Pat Surtain hasn't signed his, if I'm not mistaken. Like he's a steal right now. You're getting Derek Stingley. You're gonna have Sauce Gardner getting paid. You already had J.C. Horn get paid. Like, I don't know if they're going to be able to afford Reek down the line. So being able to find some more
Yeah.
people to throw in the mixer at corner, I think is going to be big for this team in looking forward towards the draft.
Yeah, and I think they're going to continue to add to this offensive line through your either first pick or first two picks of the draft. So, I so far free agency they've killed it so far. John has kind of redeemed himself, so it's been a good one.
Yeah. And you guys can redeem yourself for the lack of following if you're not doing it over on social media.
Got
Find
him.
me, your boy Coach Red, on X, the real Coach Red, on Instagram at the real underscore Coach Red, TikTok at the real Coach Red. Also find the show over on YouTube. Search Kicking It with Coach Red. Like, subscribe, hit the bell notifications, and leave a comment or two. Kane, where you at?
You can find me over on Twitter, K2406, TikTok, K0624. Also follow the show's socials over on Twitter and Instagram at Coach Red Pod. Follow us. Do it, freaking do it.
And as always, stay fresh.
Stay fresh, peeps.
Peace.